In February of 2025, 17-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick allegedly shot and killed her parents to death while they slept inside their Georgia home. She initially called 911 and reported finding them dead, and in the months that followed, posted emotional TikTok videos mourning their deaths, even urging true crime creators to cover the case, calling it a really big hit. But 5 months later, investigators charged Sarah with 2 counts of murder, citing physical and digital evidence they said tied her to the killings. She turned herself in and was denied bond, as prosecutors described what they called mountains of evidence, while family members publicly maintained her innocence. In 1999, Japanese woman Namiko Takaba was found murdered inside the apartment she shared with her husband, Satoru. With no arrests and very few leads, the case went cold, but Satoru refused to let it fade. Convinced that future forensic technology would eventually expose the killer, he kept paying rent on the empty apartment for 26 years, preserving the crime scene exactly as it was. Bloodstains, footprints, and untouched evidence remained sealed inside, costing him roughly $145,000 over decades. But finally, in late 2025, advances in DNA analysis finally produced a match from the preserved blood evidence. The suspect was identified as a former high school classmate of Satoru, who allegedly harbored a long-standing grudge after he rejected her romantically. Confronted with the DNA evidence, she confessed after her arrest. In 2006, the burned remains of an unidentified young woman were found along a Texas roadside, leaving her known only as Lavender Doe for years because of the purple clothing she was wearing. The case sat cold for years until an amateur sleuth began comparing online Jane Doe files and helped spark renewed attention that led to advanced DNA testing. In 2019, she was finally identified as Dana Lynn Todd, restoring her name after 13 years. In 2023, Joseph Burnett pleaded guilty to her murder and was sentenced to life in prison. 14-year-old Mexican girl Paloma Nicole Arellano died after undergoing cosmetic surgery that reportedly included breast augmentation and a Brazilian butt lift at a private clinic allegedly run by her mother's boyfriend. Authorities said she suffered severe complications following the procedure and was placed in a medically induced coma but died a few days later. Prosecutors later confirmed that the man accused of performing the procedure was arrested and charged in connection with her death, including allegations tied to practicing medicine without proper authorization. In Tewkesbury, England, 56-year-old Amanda Nixon, a mother of 10, was found guilty of essentially holding a female slave captive in her home for 25 years, exploiting her as a forced domestic servant under harrowing conditions. Nixon brought the victim into her household in the mid-1990s when she was a teenager with learning difficulties, and over the next quarter century kept her locked inside, regularly physically abusing her, strangling her, hitting her with a broom handle hard enough to knock her teeth out, squirting detergent down her throat, splashing bleach on her face, and forcibly shaving her head. Prosecutors told the court that Wixon deprived her of food, basic hygiene, medical and dental care, and any freedom to leave, even collecting state benefits paid on the victim's behalf while the victim lived in squalor. Wixon denied all the charges, blamed her son for the situation, and showed no remorse, dismissing the convictions as rubbish and refusing to express regret, as jurors convicted her of false imprisonment, forced labor, and assault after hearing evidence of the decades of cruelty. In 2024, 17-year-old Sha Ray was the sole survivor of a family murder-suicide after police say his father killed his mother, his 11-year-old brother, and his 8 and 2-year-old sisters before turning the gun on himself. Sha Ray was found alive in the family garage with a gunshot wound to his head. He miraculously survived, but the injury left him permanently blind and facing lifelong medical complications. Despite the trauma and severe injuries, Sha Ray went on to enroll at the University of Utah in 2025, beginning his freshman year just months after losing his entire immediate family. Tragically, just 1 week after starting college, he passed away from natural causes.
Well, this is my last video. It all has to come to this. Tomorrow is the day of retribution. The day in which I will have my revenge against humanity, against all of you.
That was the final video recorded by 22-year-old Santa Barbara College student Elliot Rodger just 1 day before he carried out a mass killing in Isla Vista, California. On May 23, 2014, the incel began what he called his day of retribution after years of documenting his anger toward women and sexually active men who he constantly blamed for his loneliness and rejection. In the weeks before the attack, he stockpiled firearms, ammunition, and knives and prepared a 137-page manifesto titled My Twisted World, outlining his grievances and violent intentions.
I don't know why you girls are so repulsed by me. It doesn't make sense. I'm sophisticated. I'm magnificent. I'm the ultimate gentleman. These sunglasses here were $300. Giorgio Armani. So I'll put him on. See?
On the day of the attack, he first stabbed 3 male roommates to death inside his apartment, locking their bodies behind a door to delay discovery. Elliot then drove to a nearby sorority house intending to kill women but was unable to gain entry. Instead, he shot and killed 2 women outside before continuing through Isla Vista, shooting at random pedestrians and vehicles. After a brief shootout with police, Elliot crashed his car and was found dead inside from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. 6 people were killed and 14 others were injured. Authorities later confirmed Elliot had been reported to police weeks earlier for disturbing behavior, but no weapons were confiscated. His recorded videos and manifesto continue to circulate online more than a decade after the senseless killings. Eminem was stalked by the same man who broke into his properties 3 times over 6 years, repeatedly reaching him despite arrests and court orders. In 2019, the stalker broke into one of Eminem's former homes and told the new homeowner he was looking for his brother Marshall. In 2020, he escalated by entering Eminem's actual residence through an unlocked entry point while Eminem was asleep, later telling police he was there to kill him. After being arrested and convicted, the man returned again in 2024, once more breaching Eminem's property. Court records show the break-ins weren't the result of sophisticated planning, but repeated exploitation of access points and timing, highlighting how even high-level security measures can fail against persistent obsession. Eminem was unharmed, but prosecutors described the pattern as escalating and dangerous. A mummified carrier pigeon found inside a UK chimney in 1982 was carrying an encrypted World War II message from 1944 that's never been decoded. The pigeon likely died mid-mission during Britain's wartime communications and remained sealed in the chimney for nearly 40 years. Attached to its leg was a capsule holding a coded strip of letters and numbers believed to be connected to D-Day operations. Despite repeated attempts by historians and codebreakers, the message's meaning and destination remain unknown. Britain's intelligence agency GCHQ has confirmed the cipher is still unsolved and publicly asked for help deciphering it, leaving whatever information the pigeon was carrying permanently undelivered. In February of 2007, over New South Wales, Australia, Polish-German paraglider Eva Wisniewska was sucked into a massive thunderstorm during a routine training flight and carried to nearly 33,000 feet, where temperatures dropped to around negative 50 degrees Celsius and oxygen levels were extremely low. She lost consciousness for about 40 minutes as her paraglider was tossed around inside the storm, yet somehow remained airborne. When the storm weakened, she descended and regained consciousness mid-air, surviving with only frostbite and minor bruising. Another pilot caught in the storm, Hee Zong-pin, was found dead nearly 50 miles away. In 2007 in California, a 23-year-old man crashed into a police vehicle and, fearing arrest, swallowed an absurd amount of methamphetamine he'd been carrying. He fled on foot, was chased across rooftops, and was eventually captured in a highly agitated, delirious state. At the hospital, his core body temperature reached 45 degrees Celsius, the highest ever recorded in a surviving patient with lab-confirmed stimulant overdose. He immediately had to be sedated, intubated, and aggressively cooled with ice packs and fluids as his body began to shut down. Despite the extreme heat and severe toxicity, he miraculously survived after intensive treatment. This was the moment Icelandic singer Björk crashed out at Bangkok Airport in 1996, lunging at reporter Julie Kaufman and knocking her to the ground, moments after the reporter simply greeted her with the words, "Welcome to Bangkok." What appeared to be an explosive reaction to a harmless greeting was later explained by Björk as a breaking point. She claimed Kaufman had stalked her and her 9-year-old son for days across multiple locations, ignoring requests to stop. Björk said the airport encounter triggered fear for her child's safety. Kaufman denied any stalking, no charges were filed, and the footage became one of the most infamous celebrity confrontations of the 90s. On April 16, 2014, the South Korean ferry Sewol capsized and sank off the coast of Jindo while carrying 476 people, most of them high school students on a field trip. An abrupt turn combined with overloaded cargo caused the ship to list and rapidly flood. Passengers were repeatedly told over the intercom to stay where they were. Instructions most of them followed as water quickly filled the decks. The captain and several crew members abandoned ship early, leaving hundreds trapped inside. The ferry sunk in roughly 2 hours, killing 304 people, the majority of them teenagers. The captain was convicted of gross negligence and murder by omission and sentenced to life in prison, while multiple crew members and shipping company officials received prison terms. In 1991, Mel Ignatow was accused of kidnapping, raping, and murdering his ex-girlfriend Brenda Schaefer in Louisville, Kentucky, but was shockingly acquitted after selling his house to pay for an aggressive defense attorney. A year later, a carpenter renovating that same house discovered a hidden compartment containing dozens of photographs showing Ignatow torturing, sexually assaulting, and strangling Brenda during the murder. But by this point, it was too late because of double jeopardy laws. He could never be retried for her killing, even with photographic proof. Instead, Ignatow was only convicted of perjury and evidence tampering and served just 8 years in prison for lying under oath. He walked free in 2006 and died 2 years later after falling down the stairs in his home, having escaped justice for one of the most documented murders in American history. In 1993, Sicilian mafia boss Giovanni Brusca ordered the kidnapping of 12-year-old Giuseppe Di Matteo to silence his father, a former mob insider who had begun cooperating with authorities. Disguised as police, captors lured the boy away, promising to reunite him with his dad. He was held for 779 days in degrading conditions, often caged, beaten, underfed, and moved between hideouts, while photos of his suffering were sent to pressure his father into silence. When testimony continued, Brusca ordered the kill, dismissing the boy as the puppy. Giuseppe was strangled and his body dissolved in acid to erase all evidence. The murder shocked Italy because it shattered the long-promoted myth that the mafia followed a code of honor that spared all children. But investigators in later trials revealed that this was never truly a rule, and Giuseppe's death became one of the most disturbing symbols of the mafia's retaliation tactics during the 1990s crackdowns. In 2019, police uncovered an abuse case at the Danby House nursing home in North Carolina after staff were caught recording and encouraging violent confrontations between elderly residents with dementia. Investigators said workers laughed, filmed, and allegedly urged a 73-year-old man to attack a 70-year-old woman, shouting instructions like punch her in the face while she cried for help. Both residents required constant care and couldn't fully understand what was happening, turning a supervised environment into exploitation for entertainment. The footage led to criminal charges and renewed scrutiny over how vulnerable patients in long-term care facilities can be manipulated by caregivers. Lacey Fletcher was a 36-year-old woman from Slaughter, Louisiana, who was found dead in January of 2022 after years of being left to rot on a couch in her parents' home. She suffered from severe autism and was reportedly nonverbal. When authorities arrived, Lacey's body was fused to the sofa, surrounded by years of human waste, insects, and mold. She only weighed about 96 pounds, had bed sores at exposed bone, and was covered in feces and maggots. Coroners ruled her death a homicide caused by severe neglect, starvation, and untreated medical conditions. Investigators determined she had likely been left in the same position for at least 12 years, slowly melting into the sofa while her parents lived in the house with her. Despite the horrific condition of her body and the prolonged suffering, her parents were initially charged with second-degree murder, but the charges were later reduced and ultimately dismissed by a judge in 2024, since the judge ruled that prosecutors couldn't prove that Lacey's parents intended to kill her or knowingly caused her death, triggering widespread public outrage over how such prolonged extreme neglect could result in no prison sentence. During the shooting of a Pepsi commercial in 1983, a pyrotechnic malfunction set Michael's hair on fire, leaving him with second- and third-degree burns to his scalp. He continued performing for a few seconds before realizing what was happening, and the injury led to lasting pain, baldness, and medical complications. But instead of suing Pepsi, he asked the company to fund the creation of a burn treatment center. Through the late 1880s and into the 1990s, at the peak of his career, Jackson donated hundreds of millions of dollars to charities, including children's hospitals, AIDS research, and disaster relief, even as his own life was becoming increasingly unstable behind the scenes. Around the same period, he founded the Heal the World Foundation, providing food, aid, and medical support to children in war zones in impoverished regions, including efforts connected to the Rwandan genocide. Throughout the 1990s and into the 2000s, he quietly paid for medical treatments for children, including covering hospital bills and helping fund procedures for families who couldn't afford them. He also made unannounced visits to children's hospitals, sometimes in disguise, spending time with patients and giving gifts without media attention. Much of this focus on children was tied to his upbringing under his father Joe Jackson, which he described as harsh and restrictive, and he often centered his philanthropy around giving children experiences he never had. In 2009, while preparing for his This Is It comeback shows, there were plans for continued charitable efforts tied to his performances, but he tragically died before the concerts could take place. This is the face of 87-year-old World War II veteran and daylily horticulturist Leo Sharp, who was pulled over in Michigan in 2011 after appearing confused and disoriented. A search of his vehicle uncovered more than 400 pounds of cocaine, revealing that he'd secretly spent years working as a high-level courier for Mexico's Sinaloa cartel. Because he looked so harmless and was rarely questioned, Sharp transported massive quantities of cocaine across the U.S. before being caught. He later pleaded guilty to drug trafficking charges and was sentenced to prison in his late 80s, becoming one of the oldest cartel mules ever prosecuted. In 1951, the French town of Pont-Saint-Esprit was hit by a sudden outbreak of severe illness after residents ate bread from a local bakery. Around 250 people experienced intense hallucinations, convulsions, and severe paranoia, with some reporting visions of snakes crawling out of their bodies or being consumed by flames. Several victims jumped from windows or ran screaming through the streets, while others were restrained or sedated as hospitals quickly filled beyond capacity. At least 5 people died and dozens were committed to psychiatric institutions. Investigators later concluded the outbreak was most likely caused by ergot poisoning, a toxic fungus that can contaminate rye and produce effects similar to LSD, which many historians have also theorized may have contributed to the Salem witch trials. Before he became Wolverine, Hugh Jackman was a struggling actor working kids' birthday parties as a clown named Coco, earning about $50 a gig. He's admitted he didn't even know any real magic tricks and was once told by a 6-year-old, "You're terrible." Jackman has said those early performances forced him to learn how to command a room, handle rejection, and keep entertaining no matter what, skills that would later define his stage and film career. In 1946, French designer Louis Réard named the bikini after Bikini Atoll, where the United States had just conducted atomic bomb tests. He chose the name deliberately, claiming the revealing swimsuit would have an explosive cultural impact similar to the atomic blast that had just shocked the world. Sylvester Stallone wrote the script for Rocky in about 3 days after watching underdog boxer Chuck Wepner go the distance with Muhammad Ali. At the time, Stallone was struggling financially and reportedly had less than $200 in his bank account. Studios offered to buy the script but wanted a major star in the lead role. Stallone refused any offers unless he could play Rocky himself. He took a significantly smaller payday to secure the role, a gamble that paid off when Rocky won the Academy Award for Best Picture and launched his career. This video has been causing panic across the internet after 2 rare doomsday fish washed ashore on a beach in Cabo, Mexico. Creatures are called oarfish, long ribbon-like deep-sea animals that normally live thousands of feet below the surface and are almost never seen by humans. According to Japanese folklore, oarfish are known as messengers from the sea god's palace and are said to appear before major disasters. In reality, when oarfish are seen near the surface or close to the shore, it often means they're sick, injured, or dying, which is one of the reasons why sightings are so rare. But because of the old folklore surrounding them and recent current events, the appearance of 2 at the same beach quickly sparked alarm online. Scientists in Melbourne, Australia recently did something incredible by connecting about 200,000 living human brain cells grown in a lab dish to a computer and using them to play the 1993 video game Doom. Neurons, grown from human stem cells and placed on a microchip with electrodes, received electrical signals representing what was happening in the game. When the cells fired in certain patterns, the system translated that activity into in-game actions like moving or shooting enemies. Researchers said the neurons showed signs of learning through feedback, though they currently perform poorly and often die during experiments. The project, developed by Cortical Labs as part of its biological computer, is an attempt to combine living human brain tissue with silicone hardware. In 1995, 15-year-old Elise Poller was lured to a remote eucalyptus grove in California by 3 teenage boys she knew from school. But what began as a planned meetup quickly turned into a brutal attack. Elise was stabbed multiple times and strangled, and her body was hidden in dense brush where it remained undiscovered for months. The case finally unraveled when one of the teens confessed to his youth pastor, who contacted authorities and led investigators to her remains. During questioning, the boys told police the killing was part of a satanic ritual that would help their struggling death metal band gain success. They specifically claimed they needed to sacrifice a virgin, a detail that shocked the community and drew national attention to the case. All 3 were convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to decades in prison. In recent years, 2 of the men have been granted parole while the other remains in prison, a decision that's reopened old wounds in the community nearly 3 decades later. On March 1st, 2026, a shooting occurred inside Baptist Health Brookwood Hospital shortly after 24-year-old Precious Johnson had given birth to her first child. Police said Johnson had delivered a healthy baby just minutes earlier When around 9:30 p.m., her 19-year-old husband, Kenneth Terry Jr., pulled out a handgun he had brought into the hospital room and fatally shot her before turning the gun on himself. Both were pronounced dead at the scene, while the newborn baby survived and was not reported injured. The hospital immediately went into lockdown as officers secured the maternity floor and confirmed there was no ongoing threat. Family members later said the couple had been experiencing serious relationship problems in the weeks leading up to the birth, including disputes over which relatives would be present at the hospital. Police described the case as a domestic-related murder-suicide. This clip from a 1995 talk show would later become key evidence in a murder case.
Let's have John come out here and see who has the crush on him. Here's John. Did you think Donna had the crush on you?
Did I? No, we're good friends.
Well, guess what? It's Scott that has the crush on you.
You lied to me.
1995, 32-year-old Scott Amador appeared on The Jenny Jones Show to reveal a secret crush on his longtime friend Jonathan Schmitz. Before the taping, producers had reportedly told Schmitz that a woman had a crush on him, not that the admirer would actually be his male friend. When the truth was revealed on stage, Schmitz appeared to take the surprise in stride and even laughed it off in front of the studio audience. But after the episode was recorded, he apparently became deeply embarrassed by the public revelation. Just 3 days later in Michigan, Schmitz bought a shotgun, drove to Amador's home, and shot him twice in the chest, killing him instantly. He then called 911 and confessed to the shooting. Schmitz was later convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison, eventually being released on parole in 2017. The killing, which became known as the Jenny Jones murder, sparked a nationwide debate about the ethics of 1990s ambush-style talk shows and the use of the so-called gay panic defense in court.